Babylon, June 323 BC. The greatest conqueror on earth was dying. He was only 32 years old. Yet in little more than a decade, Alexander of Macedon had built an empire unlike anything the world had ever seen. From Greece to Egypt, through Persia, and all the way to India, millions lived under his rule. Kings had fallen before him. Empires had vanished. And now, Alexander the Great lay helpless in his palace. Outside his chamber, his generals waited. Men who had followed him across deserts, mountains, and battlefields. Men who had conquered the known world together. But one question terrified them all. Who would rule after Alexander? There was no adult son, no chosen successor, no clear answer. Ancient writers tell us that when asked who should inherit his empire, Alexander gave a strange reply: to the strongest. Whether he truly said those words, we may never know. But if he did, they would condemn his empire to decades of bloodshed. Because the men standing around his bed were not friends. They were rivals. And each one believed he deserved the world. Alexander was dead, but his generals were just getting started. Alexander was gone, but his empire remained. An empire stretching from Macedonia and Greece through Egypt and the Middle East, across Persia and deep into Central Asia. It was the largest empire on earth. And suddenly, it had no master. Babylon descended into confusion. Soldiers demanded answers. Generals argued, and no one knew what would happen next. Alexander's half-brother, Philip Aridius, was alive, but he lacked the ability to rule alone. Meanwhile, Alexander's wife, Roxana, was pregnant. Perhaps the child would be a boy. Perhaps he would inherit everything. But the child had not yet been born, and empires do not wait. For days, Alexander's commanders argued behind closed doors. Compromise eventually prevailed. Philip Aridius would become King Philip III, and if Roxana's child proved to be a son, he too would be king. But everyone understood the truth. Neither king would truly rule. Power rested elsewhere, in the hands of the men who had conquered the world. And the men who had fought side by side with Alexander were about to turn on each other. In Babylon, Alexander's generals reached an agreement, at least for now. Perdiccas became the most powerful man in the empire. Ptolemy received Egypt. Lysimachus took Thrace. Antigonus gained much of Asia Minor. And Seleucus, still a rising commander, waited for his opportunity. History would remember them as the Diadochi, the successors. Officially, they ruled in the names of Philip III and the unborn Alexander IV. But nobody intended to remain a servant forever. Each man had commanded armies. Each had shared Alexander's victories. And each believed himself worthy of greatness. The empire had been divided. But nobody wanted just a piece. Everyone wanted everything. The agreement in Babylon did not bring peace. It merely delayed the inevitable. Alexander's generals had conquered the world together, but none of them intended to live in another man's shadow. Perdiccas, acting as regent for the kings, tried to preserve the empire. But ambition was everywhere, and suspicion poisoned every alliance. In Egypt, Ptolemy made his first move. He seized Alexander's body, not merely for burial, but for legitimacy. Because whoever possessed Alexander's memory could claim his legacy. Perdiccas marched against him. But before he could even reach victory, his own officers turned against him. In 321 BC, Perdiccas was murdered by his own men. And with him, the dream of a united empire began to crumble. New alliances appeared. Old friendships vanished. Generals who had once fought side by side at Issus and Gaugamela now fought one another. Antigonus, Ptolemy, Seleucus, Cassander, Lysimachus. Each wanted more. Each believed destiny belonged to him. Coalitions formed. Coalitions collapsed. Battles followed battles. And the empire Alexander had forged in 13 years was slowly destroying itself. But while the generals fought for power, another obstacle remained: the blood of Alexander himself. And for ambitious men, even his family stood in the way.
Alexander was dead, but his family still lived. His mother, Olympias, his wife, Roxana, his half-brother, King Philip III, and his son, Alexander IV, a child who had never seen his father. As long as they lived, the dream of a united empire still had a symbol, and symbols are dangerous, especially to men who want crowns. In Macedonia, Olympias returned to power. She ordered the execution of Philip III and his wife Eurydice. But revenge soon followed. Cassander captured Olympias, and in 316 BC, Alexander's mother was executed. Roxana and young Alexander IV were imprisoned. Years passed. The boy who was supposed to inherit the greatest empire on earth grew up in captivity. Until one day, he disappeared. So did his mother. Ancient sources leave little doubt. Both had been murdered on Cassander's orders. No grand funeral. No glorious ending. The son of Alexander the Great died in silence. And with him, the bloodline of Alexander came to an end. Within a few years, his mother was gone. His wife was gone. His son was gone. His brother was gone. And the family that had conquered the world had vanished from history.
By the beginning of the 3rd century BC, one man stood above the others: Antigonus Monophthalmus. Antigonus the One-Eyed. Of all Alexander's successors, he came closest to rebuilding the empire. His armies were powerful, his ambitions limitless, and his enemies were afraid. So they united. Ptolemy in Egypt, Seleucus in the east, Lysimachus in Thrace, Cassander in Macedonia. Former companions of Alexander, now allies against another companion. In 301 BC, their armies met near the town of Ipsus. It would become one of the most important battles in ancient history. Antigonus was 80 years old, but he still rode into battle, confident, determined, believing victory was near. Instead, he watched his army collapse around him. Surrounded by enemies, the old conqueror refused to flee. ancient accounts say he stood his ground until enemy spears finally struck him down. Antigonus fell, and with him, the last serious hope of restoring Alexander's empire. After Ipsus, there would be no more united empire, only separate kingdoms: Egypt, Macedonia, and the vast Seleucid East. Alexander's empire had survived its creator for barely 2 decades. His conquests remained, but his dream was gone. Alexander's dream died at Ipsus.
Alexander's dream was dead, but his world did not disappear. Out of the ruins, new kingdoms emerged. In Egypt, Ptolemy established his own dynasty, and under his descendants, Alexandria became one of the greatest cities on earth. Far to the east, Seleucus built an empire stretching from Syria to Persia, a kingdom so vast that it rivaled the old Persian Empire itself. And back in Europe, Macedonia remained under the rule of another branch of Alexander's successors. 3 kingdoms, 3 dynasties, 3 rival heirs to a dead empire. They fought, they traded, they competed, and each claimed to preserve Alexander's legacy. No one had rebuilt his empire, but no one had forgotten him either. The language of government remained Greek. Greek cities continued to flourish. And from Egypt to Afghanistan, the world still bore the mark of one man. Alexander's empire was gone, but Alexander's world lived on.
The wars ended. Kings rose and fell. But something greater survived. Not an empire, a civilization. Historians call it the Hellenistic Age. Greek ideas spread farther than ever before. New cities appeared across Asia. Trade connected distant lands. And Alexandria, founded by Alexander himself, became the intellectual capital of the ancient world. Its libraries attracted scholars from every corner of the Mediterranean. Mathematicians, astronomers, philosophers, doctors, scientists. Men like Euclid, Archimedes, and Eratosthenes would flourish in the world Alexander had created. Greek culture mixed with Egyptian traditions, Persian customs, and Eastern influences, creating something entirely new. And centuries later, another rising power inherited this world: Rome. The Romans conquered the Greek kingdoms, but in many ways, Greek civilization conquered Rome. Roman emperors spoke Greek. Roman elites studied Greek philosophy. And Greek ideas continued shaping the Western world. Alexander's empire shattered, but his civilization conquered time. Alexander the Great, dead at 32. His mother executed. His brother murdered. His wife murdered. His son murdered. His generals turning against one another. The greatest empire on earth, gone within a single generation. And yet, from its ruins, rose the Ptolemies of Egypt, the mighty Seleucid Empire, and a Greek world that would influence Rome itself. Empires disappear, kings die, dynasties vanish, but history never truly ends, because every great empire leaves behind another world. And perhaps that is the greatest legacy any ruler can leave behind. Not an empire, not a throne, but a world that survives them.
worlds after them.